Live from the Washington, D.C. area, all empowered citizens need to know about intelligent use of resources, smart governance, inclusive communities, smart industry, and healthy, thriving urbanization. This is Smart Sustainability, the TV talk about shaping a sustainable future in the digital age with Nicolette DeVidar. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Nicolette DeVidar. COVID-19 has done many things, but one thing we actually all agree on, it pushed everyone out of their comfort zone. There's hardly a person on the planet who hasn't been pushed in some way, no matter where you live. Business as usual doesn't exist anymore for anyone, whether that's in politics, society, culture, or work. Think about it. What would your boss have said just a year ago if you had asked to work 100% remote? Or if someone had told you that the world economy would shut down entirely? What was once unthinkable has become thinkable with almost everything. We have civil unrest in cities, we have a global economic tsunami on our doorsteps. Uncertainty can be frightening, no question. And many are struggling with that. We already live in a new world, whether you like it or not, whether you recognize it or not. This new world is not fully defined yet. In fact, it's more like a foggy silhouette. But we all know it feels different. So, resilience, imagination, and opportunity are all something we have to come to embrace, with many aspects of our lives dissolving right in front of our eyes. What actually keeps you going when your environment, the things you grew up with, the things you held on to, the things you've defined yourself by, the things you've been familiar with, the things that give you a sense of security are gone? Do we bounce? Can this unprecedented global crisis even bounce you forward towards something better? What if we think about all the things that are dissolving around us differently? After all, if COVID has shown us anything, it's that the unthinkable is thinkable. That's what we discussed this evening. My first guest is a former Guinness World Record holder in table tennis. Talk about bounce, who bounced himself forward and turned his life mission into a career. He's now advising corporate rebels to take matters into their own hands. And what that looks like, we'll find out. My second guest is a growth mindset coach who helps people use the COVID crisis as a stepping stone towards achieving more fulfillment in life and do what they always wanted to do. Welcome on Smart Sustainability, Richard Bowling and Michele Clipper. And just for our viewers to know, talk about bounce. We are short on crew members tonight, so we have to bounce also to make this work for everyone. So thank you so much for staying with us, and let's see what our guests have to say. Richard, can you hear me?
I can.
Awesome. So I wanted to start with you and talk a little bit about your story. So you did a movie was done about you, which was called Inspired to Bounce. What's the story behind it? So in other words, what got you inspired to bounce?
I was inspired to bounce originally because I wanted to leave my career of engineering to do something which I loved, which was table tennis. And after doing this for 20 years, I realized, the theme of this journey could be put under this name called Inspired to Bounce, because I literally bounced from my job into the world of table tennis. And so I thought it was just a wonderful title to explain that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually wondering if you took that allegory from the bouncing from the table tennis and then actually launched off into a new career once again to really start your mission, right?
So I bounced twice.
Exactly. So before we go over to Michele, I have one question. I read from your taglines and the lead-in. So you focus on frustrated corporate rebels. Who's a frustrated corporate rebel?
A frustrated corporate rebel is a person who's employed and they don't really like what they're doing and they're looking for something else and they don't know what that is. And I would like to support them as a coach to step into entrepreneurship. So a frustrated corporate rebel is someone that's brilliant but is just stuck in their career. They have the skills and they don't know how to step into something greater, which could be entrepreneurship.
Okay, but then I have one question though on this one. So a corporate rebel to me is somebody, it's more than not liking your job. If you're a corporate rebel has something that's very competitive to it, something that's very challenging assumptions, challenging the way of thinking, probably also challenging the corporate structure. Versus when you look at people who don't like their jobs, in fact, there was a statistic out not too long ago that said only 1 in 5 people like their jobs. So that's a lot of people who are 15%. In need of a rethink.
Yeah, it's 15%. Yeah, corporate rebel, I mean, they are really somebody that I say rebel in the terms of they don't really fit necessarily in that corporate environment. They have something bigger and greater, and so their natural tendency is a little bit of a friction inside the corporate space. So they're so they're a little bit of a rebel in that sense.
So you help people who have that inner drive, who have a certain vision and say, well, maybe, I could do this differently, but they're a little bit hesitant in terms of taking the leap?
Right. They're scared to take that leap because, it's nice to have that steady paycheck.
Yes.
And
the benefits.
So it takes a lot of courage to step out, and you actually need to have that support on the mindset side and also on the business mentoring side. On both fronts, you need that support.
Yeah, and this is a great lead-in to introduce Michele, because Michele you are a growth mindset coach, and before we get more into your story also, what is a growth mindset?
A growth mindset is, I've read many books about it, and it really spills over into all areas of life. It's really, whether it's thinking outside the box, taking action outside the box, a lot of what Richard was talking about, not settling for, but achieving what you want, separating the, whatever's going on around you and streamlining it to what's urgent to your personal goals and your personal success, whether it's feeding the family, whether it's finding employment, and just having the growth mindset that we're not stuck where we are. We can move, we're all born the same way. I think, Nicolette, we talked about this. Naked, with upside down, with the fear of falling, the fear of loud noises. And the rest of that we put together as we go along. So I'm constantly encouraging people to push their mindset, to shift, to get out of where they are and move on to where they want to be, and use their past or COVID as a stepping stone to get there rather than an obstacle.
Yeah, and I was actually only going to say right now, this would be the time to have a growth mindset.
Exactly.
But is this a natural way of thinking for some and others have to work on that? Or is this something that some people develop over the course of their lives because they encounter more challenging circumstances around their lives? Or where do you draw the line? Is this something we're all born with?
Yeah, good question, Nicolette. And you mentioned earlier resiliency, and that's huge. And, we're all born the same. So there's a conversation about born leaders. Through my work with many, many, many people and groups of people I talked to in just the last 7 days, are ready for change. They're not using their childhood and whatever baggage they have. I talk about backpacking. I love that. And I tell them empty the rocks that are inside there that are weighing you down, because I think my belief is that everybody has it in them. If we've learned these things that are not helping us move out of where we are, we can unlearn those things. I'm a firm believer of that.
But that's the hard part. How do you unlearn things? How do you, in fact, using your packing analysis right now, I think if you'd ask people, I'm going to talk to our viewers too, so if somebody asked you right now, for example, what would you take along or what would you leave behind if you had to pack everything in one bag? Would you be really easy and clear about what to take and what to leave behind? I think that's very difficult. So how do we get to a point of wading through all of what's baggage and what can you really shed and what needs to stay behind and what is something that you take forward.
Mm-hmm. I think that the first conversation needs to be, what do you want? What does an individual want, and when do they want it?
Mm-hmm.
And then we can begin to unpeel the layers of what's preventing them from getting there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I was famous, I'll just give you a small example, for putting 20 things on my to-do list every day and then beating myself up if I didn't get there. But you know what? I have a coach and a mentor, and she said, put three on your list. Boil it down to the three most important things. If it's a job search, we're going to talk about all kinds of things tonight. How do we do that? If it's feeling isolated, how do we fix that? If it's being bombarded with all this negative social media and everything feeling like it's just on top of us, maybe we need to evaluate who we're listening to and how we're spending our time. So we use a very specific program, I'm sure, as Richard does, to work with people on pivoting that on financial success, on emotional success, physical success, and that's some of what we're going to get into. I absolutely believe we can make those choices.
So when you look around right now, what is your impression of what's going on, in the communities we live in? Are most people already looking towards a growth mindset, or is the majority still stuck in the fear factor and in something that really ties us down?
Yeah, the fear factor is huge right now.
Yeah.
I think, and we're bombarded with it. And I think that many people are reaching out, and Richard could say as well, many people are reaching out because they're realizing what they thought was once secure is not secure.
Exactly.
And so I think people are looking. I've had a 30 to 50% increase of people reaching out to me for things on coaching, mentoring, growth mindset, financial security, physical health, emotional health. I think people are looking, and we're going to make a difference.
Yeah, because as I mentioned at the intro, it is really, when you see everything else around you dissolving, which is really what's happening right now, then I think we've come to realize, if COVID has taught us anything, I think most people have realized that we're not as secure as we thought we would be, and hence we got to find other things that keep us going. And then the question is, what does keep you going? So I think that's really important. So what I'm hearing, though, and I heard that from both of you, I think, is the first thing is clarity. Now, Richard, when you work with people, I presume the first step you work with them through is also first getting clarity on what it is they really want?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in terms of a career situation.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the first steps is getting, I would say, clarity, but deep clarity. I mean, you have to get clear about what you're trying to get clear about. And when people come to you, they don't really realize that there's a goal behind the goal. Yes, you might want the $1 million, but you want the $1 million to do what? To experience what? And then there's something behind that. And there are different layers that you have to clarity, and most people are just aware of that surface layer. But when they are aware of that deepest layer, then that changes everything. Then you can start to begin to moving towards that.
Yeah, I would actually imagine that this is the hardest part, because I think that the homework on the clarity, on finding out what it is you really want and why you want something, is probably the biggest piece of the work, so to speak, that before you get into this. Correct?
Yeah. So one of the things that I do in the beginning is I have them to start crafting their own personal definition of success, because people are usually operating off of someone else's definition of success, and that's where all the misalignment happens within the person. So if they can start creating their own definition of success, and that's actually a part of what success is that you're actually operating from your own definition.
Is this also something that the COVID challenge has brought on that many of the definitions that we used to have sort of as a streamlined mainstream society definition, like success. For most people, if you ask them about success, they would probably say, well, success in job, success in career, and have a big bank account. Now, this has changed because there is two factors I've observed. So there is an inner awakening of people. They're finding out more that they really want more purpose and more meaning in life. But then also I'm seeing more and more that people have the courage to start defining things a little differently from mainstream. Are you witnessing this in the work you do?
A little bit. In my coaching, although we're in this COVID situation, we're still mostly focused on the thing that they're working on.
Right.
But indirectly, I mean, my general feeling is that, right now is the greatest opportunity of our lifetimes to really kind of examine what's important to us.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people, my feeling is that a lot of people are doing that right now. I know that myself, I'm doing that right now.
Yes.
What's really important. So it really helps us to ask that question.
So can bouncing be learned?
Well, that's funny. I like to joke that I used to teach people how to swing at table tennis balls. Now I help people to swing at mental ping pong balls. Everything with personal growth, comes down to being able to shift your perspective. Mm-hmm. And with my clients, I have certain tools that I give them to actually help them to shift your perspective. Because when you shift your perspective, you see everything differently. It's like if you're driving to a road, and if you look out the left window, you see mountains. If you look out the right mountain, you see the beach. Mm-hmm. Well, the key is that if you can give them a tool to shift from that left window to the right window, they're actually able to see different things. I mean, beaches and mountains are both equally as important. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, what's important to them, and do they have the tool to shift from that left window to the right window? So I have a variety of tools that I work with clients on being able to shift their perspective.
And this is part of the reason why I really thought this topic tonight would be a stellar topic for us to talk about, because it is all about shifting perspectives. And I think if COVID has taught us, it has taught us many things. So it has taught us that what all the parameters that we used to think in, they have shifted. So the unthinkable became thinkable in a way. But then also, what if we look at this? Yes, it's tragic. It's very disruptive to our lives. It does a lot of things. But if we shift perspective and look on the other side, it really does also a lot of things that have a positive effect on our lives. Like, for example, as Richard just mentioned, everyone looks more at what you really want in life. So there is a reflection point in a way that really helps us forward. So if we start thinking along these lines, that we can, what used to be unthinkable has become thinkable, wouldn't that help us to leapfrog tremendously forward? That would mean we could really challenge almost any assumption that we've made, right?
I think it's not a crisis. In a way, it's actually a gift. To really take time to slow down. You can work on your health and your spirituality and yoga and meditation and connect deeply with people, even though it's over the phone. So it's really, or journaling. I mean, there's so many different things that people can be doing for transformation at this time. It's indirectly, it's a gift in many ways. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, I would agree. Now, Michele, when clients come to you, do they usually come with a specific idea in mind already, or a specific purpose of what they want to work on? Or is this something they call you and they say, I need help?
I would kind of dovetail with Richard in that often they know where they want to arrive, usually. Yeah. And they really know where they don't want to be. We call them pain and pleasure points. They don't want to be concerned about if they get let go at work and they can't put food on the table. They don't want to be concerned about feeling isolated and nobody to talk to. They want to shift. They want to use more. I mean, we were thrusted into the information age, and hat goes off to all those in the front lines and everybody taking care of us, not discounting that at all. I agree with Richard. There is a huge silver lining here. Businesses are born, mindsets are shifted.
Yes.
People become more aggressive in a good way, professionally and business-wise during this time. So people are coming to me, many of them with that hunger. Things aren't the way they used to be. Everything for me is like blown out of the water. How do I get back to what I want to do? So they really come to me with a desire, many of them, to change where they are and to shift into movement. We do different techniques, and we do, like I said, a mastermind group, and we talk about who are you associating with. When do you feel powerful and productive? Okay, what's going on right then? When do you feel dark and down and this caught up in the circumstances? Who told you to stay under there? Get out of there. and we begin to isolate, because it's very personal for each person. We begin to isolate what's having them think and be where they are, and preventing them, like Richard said, from being where they want to be. So I would say that most of them come to me wanting to change. A lot of them wanting a good group of people to associate with that builds them up and makes them feel good, and that has success in their life already in the areas that they want to succeed in. Whether it's entrepreneurship, right, Richard, or whether it's a nonprofit or a startup. I don't do those things with them, but I teach them on the journey how to get they want to go, because they know that part. But Nicolette, you're right. A large percentage of people are coming out now, and if they're not, maybe they're going to hear tonight and they're going to reach out. We can't make someone want to be successful. We can't make someone want to do better in their environment and their surroundings, but they can maybe hear something we're saying, and they can make the decision to come on and get in a coaching and mentorship situation, finding an area where their finances are not threatened and they can feel more secure. They could be the go-to person in their family where people come for support. So they kind of come to me with all that, Nicolette, but it's a little discombobulated.
Yes.
And we use different techniques and different programs and different situations to get them where they want to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It definitely does. I want to talk with both of you about an important aspect in all of this. So we know we have a lot of unemployed people out there. We know that the economy has been hit very severely, and the likelihood of how long this is going to take to ever even recuperate, I actually doubt that it's going to recuperate the way it was before, because we're way past that already. But apart from that, so you have a lot of people that are at a point in their life where they have an idea, they feel like, I really would like to do this and this and this, but, and then comes the big but. So there is a lot of fear, and Richard mentioned that a little bit. It takes a lot of courage to do that actual step and get from either an employment that you've had your secure paycheck to a step forward into really bringing in your own paycheck, so to speak, or your own money, and also really go in the deep end of the unknown. Can someone who's that fearful, is it possible to handhold or work with someone to get through those fears in a very practical, pragmatic, hands-on manner? Who wants to go first? Michele, since you're still on. Richard, you go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, there is a practical way to support them. The thing is that when we're approaching certain things, there's, I would say there's so many decisions that are going on in a person's mind. They can go this way, and of course, a lot of those things are driven by fear, you know?
Yep.
And fear makes it very complicated to choose.
Yes.
It makes it complicated, and also you're not choosing for the right reason. So if you can minimize the fear, if you can really minimize that fear, and then it makes it easier to make a clear and a powerful decision. And the thing is, a lot of people don't realize is that there are oftentimes making decisions out of fear. What happens is their heart is pulling them in one way, but the fear is saying, well, don't go that way. And so that it's like a dog's chasing its tail. So one way is to minimize the fear and get them to get into a powerful place to become very calm and very clear. And then it's just easier for them to make the decisions moving forward. And when you start making a decision, start moving towards it, actually doors start to open up, and you don't have to see the whole thing. But if you make a decision and take a step, you make a decision and you take a step, and as long as you get this momentum is going, this is what really creates those doors of possibility open for you.
So hold on a second. So from what you said on this one, that almost sounds like you have to envision it as you have a blindfold on and somebody asks you to take one step at a time. And I think this is the big issue that for viewers also to understand that you don't have to see the whole road ahead, but to get started really is just with this very first step to get out there. But then there's a huge other component, and that's trust.
Yes. Yeah.
How do you develop that?
And the thing is that, successful people are not doing anything special that everybody else is doing. Is they're just taking the first step, and then they're just taking the next step. And, you see them, go all the way to billionaire or whatever happened, but they're just taking the next step and the next step and the next step. So you just have to be fearless enough to take the next step. You don't have to be fearless enough to climb the whole mountain in the beginning, but you just have to get fearless enough. And so you just bring the person down to what's the next decision that you need to make to move this forward, and what action can you take on the decision. And let's just do that. Don't try to figure everything out from right now. Let's just take what's the next decision, next step, next decision, next step.
So who do you have to trust? Do you have to trust in yourself? Do you have to trust in the universe? Do you have to trust in your ability to be able to meet all those challenges? How would you prioritize that?
I would say, you have to trust in yourself. And if you believe in God and the universe, that's fine. I think it's just the trust in the process, and that's really, if you just give yourself credit for committing to the process of making a decision, taking action, making a decision, taking it, and without being attached to the outcome along the way, and really trusting in the process. If you make decisions and take the actions, trust the process, then it's going to eventually unfold into something great.
Yeah. So we're almost out of time for this first half of the show. We're going to pick it right back up when we come back. So please stay with us. We'll talk more about how do we bounce. I guess I'm just hearing we're not having a break. Okay, we go straight through, so we can pick it right back up in where we were, and talk a little bit more about this. So you take one step at a time, you move forward, and you say you trust in the process. Now the issue I have with that, and I think a lot of our viewers probably do, you probably have issues with that too, is if you don't know the process, it's very difficult to trust. So how do you get to a point of understanding the process?
So that's where you work with a coach. And the coach is going to talk to you a little bit about neuroscience and how your brain works, and how your brain is not designed to protect you. It's not designed to make you successful. So from a neuroscience standpoint, you have to understand, you have to rewire your brain a little bit. And working with a coach can help you to understand how your brain's resistance to moving forward. Your brain is actually trying to protect you. It was trying to protect you from saber-toothed tigers and all of these different things. So it's really trying to protect you, but it's not designed to really help you succeed at a big level. So that's when you work with a coach to help you understand that, how your brain works in that fashion.
Yeah, that's very important. Michele, do you have something to add? What's your take on this one?
I 100% agree. It's maybe taking something that you see as fearful and replacing it with something less fearful. I used to have a fear of speaking, believe it or not, and friends of mine will tell you, in my family, I would just say myth, the first syllable of my name, and I would melt down into tears. And this was a problem in the corporate arena when I had to present reports and so forth. And it was a problem when I wanted to, become what I do now with a compassionate, really entrepreneur, someone that coaches and empowers others, because sometimes they don't have the strength. So a little bit like Richard alluded to, they may be barely holding on to you because you're telling them, if I have it inside of me, you have it inside of me. And just like Richard said, other people, successful people have the same fears. They went through the same stuff, or maybe the same journey that Richard's talking about. The difference is they kept getting up. They kept pushing forward. They kept making it happen again and again and again, and standing on top of their failures. And I did this. Hey, that didn't work. I'm not going to do that again. Let me talk to my coach, see what I should do this time. It's surrounding yourself with people that have the success that you have. And I totally agree with what Richard said with the brain. I think a lot of times it's repetition, repetition, repetition. Really breaking it down into bite-sized pieces that you can do to reach, slightly towards your goal, and then doing that bite-sized piece. And then if it's a failure, learning from the failure, it's kind of like parenting. The three of us are parents, right? It didn't come with the manual, right? We had to say, okay, my parents raised me like this and I love it. Okay, they did that. I'm not going to use that again. And we begin to start that journey of parenthood and entrepreneurship or whatever someone's goal is the same thing. They want financial security. I'm going to talk to them about what were the pre-existing behaviors before COVID. Maybe we need to analyze that, and what can we do moving forward to take care of that and get the brain, because Richard is right. The brain is neutral. It only acts on what we put in it, right? Yep. So we get to teach them to take out the fearful things. Maybe it's reading all the negative social media. Maybe it's listening to people that aren't building us up. Maybe it's an environment we're in where they're saying you're not supposed to be anybody. You can't move on. We think these things are little, but they're not little. Like Richard said, they're all in there, and the brain only believes what it hears, what's repeated, and it acts on. And we have to move from there.
So in other words, the brain really draws from stored information because it can't really go and see the new ones that's coming forward, because the only thing a brain does, kind of like a computer, actually that's kind of like with a lot of what even artificial intelligence or robots are doing, they draw from stored information, but they have a hard time in adapting to new circumstances because they've never experienced that. So what I'm hearing from both of you is that you have to rewrite, so to speak, or reset and erase a lot of those previous stored information because they're not true, or they may not have really materialized that way. Which brings me to another point, and I do want to talk about this, and that's 2 points: resilience and assumptions. Let's start with assumptions first, because assumptions are also something that we have parameters in our brain. They're in there, so to speak, and you draw assumptions. Based on those assumptions, we kind of tend to think this might work or that this might not work. Now, COVID has shown us that assumptions are just that, assumptions. They may mean nothing. So if we toss this overboard, how can you work on yourself to get yourself to a point of challenging assumptions that you basically had or that you're holding on to?
One of the processes that I use with my clients is I have 3 questions that I give them anytime they have an assumption, especially if they have an assumption that's bringing some type of pain or struggle. You ask the question, is that true? You can write this down. Is that true?
Yeah.
How do you know that? How do you know that's true? And the third question is, can I see it another way? And I have them ask themselves these 3 questions: Is that true? How do I know it's true? And can I see it another way? Because whether something is true or not is really not as important. Is it helping me? Like someone might say, can you make money in your business when the economy is going down? Is that true? Well, it doesn't really, it might be true, it may not be true. What you want to do is you want to find something that's going to help you to move forward. Because some people, they do make money when the economy is down because they have a good belief.
Yep.
They have a belief.
Yep.
It's all true. So once you realize it's all true, so what do you want to be true for you? And so that when you realize that you have that power to choose a belief that's going to move you in the direction that you're wanting to move into. That's the key.
Which then really puts, the human in his own universe.
Yes. Yeah, then you start to feel, wow, I can choose beliefs just like picking food at the grocery store, and then you start to choose you put the things in your basket that you actually want to cook.
Yeah.
Don't
Now,
just put everything into your shopping basket.
Now,
Absolutely.
one thing I've noticed is when you ask people sometimes to challenge assumptions, very often humans have a tendency to get very defensive about this. How do you bypass that? How do you navigate that?
I'll let Michelle, maybe you want to answer that one first.
How do you navigate when people
Get
I
defensive.
understand. Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying, Nicolette. And I think they're usually anchoring that to their particular circumstances. And I think it sometimes it's a difficult conversation to have, but I think it comes down to what are we here for?
Yeah.
What is it that you want to achieve that you're not achieving yet? And I use, and a friend of mine taught me the Socratic method, right? So talk to them and have them tell me what do they want to achieve? What do they feel is getting in the way? Rather than me telling them what I feel is getting in the way. And when they come from a position of sharing what they feel and whatever that is, all the stuff we talked about already in the conversation so far, or maybe even something like not feeling enough energy to do anything, just feeling like, oh, I'm under the circumstances, or just not knowing I'm a people person and now I can't be around people. Okay, that I hear you, and that's so, that's a real challenge. What do you think you can do to feel like you're more around people? And they'll come up with explanations, or they may say, what do you think? And I say, well, hey, I got on Zoom twice with my nieces. We had a great time. We do a mastermind group once a week. We're doing dinner once a month on Zoom. Okay, giving them ideas. Do you think any of that would work for you? And really getting them to decide what these assumptions are. Not me telling them, but getting them to decide what these assumptions are, because they're generally talking to me because they're not reaching their goals. They're not feeling financially stable. They're not feeling healthy. They have they have energy levels or immune system. They need to be built up. All of that we talk about, but they need to decide what they want to work on. And when they make that decision instead of me, it's a win-win. And that's what we work on.
So,
and I think, just being able to ask a question that, like when someone has an assumption or if they had an assumption or a belief that's not helping them, you can just ask them a simple question. Well, how is that belief serving you? Okay, you believe that's true, and they say, and ask them, how is that working for you? How is that serving you? Is that helping you? Is that assumption or belief, is it actually helping you to move forward?
Yeah.
And then they'll realize, well, that actually doesn't actually help me having that belief.
Exactly.
Then we start to look at tools, how we can start to change to something, have a new perspective.
But how?
A lot of times we do replace. We don't just say, okay, stop that behavior. I had a friend had an issue with YouTube. His time was just so absorbed by watching YouTube. So my thing was, how do you think you can replace that? How does YouTube make you feel? So the conversation was, watch information that's going to get you closer to your goal, because you're still getting to watch, the screen time, but maybe watch someone that's successful in entrepreneurship or successful with retired veterans, or whatever the conversation is, to get them to replace that behavior with another behavior that's going to get them closer to their goal. That's an easy step to take.
I think the hardest one, though, and I'm going to ask both of you on this one, how often do you hear the answer when you ask them about assumptions and people explain what these assumptions are, and you ask them, how does this work for you? Does it work for you or not? But how often do you get the reply, well, this is just how it is? How do you navigate, how do you bypass that? It's more like what mainstream thinks it is. This is kind of the indoctrinated mainstream thinking. So how do you bypass that? How do we ditch that overboard? Because obviously we no longer need this, and we're not well served having old assumptions like that.
That is a common question. They will say that's just how it is. It's just. This is how, for example, a client might say, this is how my industry is, and this is how things go. And I hear that quite a bit, and that's And that's why I'll play a game. Well, what if it weren't like that? What would happen? Just play a hypothetical.
Yeah.
And it's almost like it's almost like when you go to the movies, you have this. When we watch a movie, we suspend our disbelief so that we can enjoy the movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know that this is make believe. We know that it's an actor. We know that this is, but we suspend our disbelief so we can enjoy the film. Well, you can sort of play those games in clients in a fun way and say, well, what if this assumption weren't true? Just for example, and what if this was a possibility? How would that feel? What would life be like? And you just kind of entertain them a little bit of entertaining a new idea, and that's one way to introduce a new idea. Say, what if? That's a great way to start. What if?
Yep. So I wanted to talk quickly about resilience. Everyone talks about resilience. You hear it a lot out there. We all hear it actually, that we need to become more resilient, whether this is in cities or whether this is in communities or whatsoever. Is there a common definition on what resilience actually is?
I think in its most fundamental terms, it means to bounce back to normal condition, like a foam mattress is resilient, right? Because I have a foam mattress, and you push down on it, and then when you get up the next day, it goes back to its original position. And so that's a quality of the foam mattress, and I think it's a quality of the human spirit to be able to become resilient. So the question is that we have the capacity to bounce back to our normal natural selves. The question is, do we have a tool? Now, a mattress will go back to its form. A foam mattress will go back to its form by itself. With a person, some people have more of a natural ability to do that, and some who don't, then they need to have some tool or some process to help them to cultivate that resilience.
Michele, you have something to add on this one?
I agree. I'll use just a quick example. An uncle of mine worked with families on kind of like a social worker, getting families together, helping them function as a family, take care of things. And one house he went into was very not kept. So he went back and he taught them, with disinfectant and cleaning and everything. And the family was fine before, and then they went through this time period with him. And then when he went back to check on them again, many of them were sick, okay? Because they had built up a resiliency to germs in that atmosphere that they lived in. So instead of gradually changing that atmosphere, his mindset was just completely change it. And I think, and when we think about that as people, you mentioned earlier, Richard, a gift. Resiliency is a gift. It's the struggle that keeps us strong enough to move forward. It's learning from the mistakes. It's how you hear about whatever kind of successful person in business, the failures that they had and how they learned from those failures. We had, and I shared this with you, Nicolette, that my dad passed away about a little over a week and a half ago. And I had a decision to make, am I going to move forward with this? I couldn't change him passing away. So what we decided as a family, we would go on a hiking trip in his honor. We had a celebration, a gathering in his honor, and we haven't even done everything yet. We've been out and we've rallied together as a family, and we've chosen to be resilient under these circumstances. And when someone says they can't be, like, Richard, we were talking about earlier, the question is, okay, let's talk about how you can be, okay? If someone doesn't want to eat any sweets, okay, it's not 0 sweets in the house. Maybe it's one cheat day, okay? It's one cheat day. And all of a sudden for 6 days, they're doing better. Or maybe you start with 2 cheat days and you begin to build that I can do it attitude and begin resiliency. And failure is okay. It's just not bouncing back from failure is the part that is not okay if they want to achieve their goals. So the resiliency is what's going to prepare us. And we coach a lot of people. If I didn't go through the struggles and the challenges of what I have, what good am I going to be doing sympathetically, helping others build their resiliency and learning to bounce out of these situations? So it's really a grassroots conversation with them about what's going on, how are you feeling, and what can we do to move forward with it? Because we all have that. And now it's like on steroids with COVID. So resiliency is such a gift, and it's so important to let people know it's okay to be that way. But let's talk about what we need to do to take that next step and use what we have as leverage to catapult us forward. That's the way I feel about it. Resiliency is very important.
What are the three most important characteristics or traits one must have to actually be resilient?
I think the first thing is really acceptance of what's happening, like a deep acceptance of, if it's somebody died or if this is a situation. Our first reaction is a resistance to what this is not happening, But once you just accept, this is actually happening, and that's just the first, So I think that's the first step. I'll let Michele add to that one.
So what you're saying, Richard, is being aware and present in what's going on.
Yeah, this is happening.
Exactly. And not spending energy on what we can't change.
Right.
Okay. We can't change COVID. We can personally use our masks, use our sanitizer, be conscious of people around us, be at 6 feet, build our immune system protocol. A friend of mine that's a pulmonologist put together a great program for families and children that we've been able to help people with. There's certain things that we can take and do specifically, but we need to realize what we can't change and what's getting our energy, right? So being resilient is understanding the here and now. That's one thing. I know you said three things, Nicolette. Another thing I would say about being resilient is if you don't think you have what it takes, which I know you are enough. Everybody watching this movie or this TV show, Nicolette does these amazing programs. Everybody dialed in here, you are enough to accomplish what you need to accomplish. If you don't think that way, then you hook yourself up to someone that does think that way about you, and you lean on them until you get where you want to be. You associate with people that are where you want to be. So it's understanding your circumstances. It's looking for people outside of those circumstances that are where you want to be, and grabbing onto them, knowing that you are enough, or just leaning onto them until you have that belief, like Richard and I and Nicolette, we know you're enough. And the third thing I would say is organizing yourself.
Yeah.
But what's urgent and important and what is just like too much emotion or too much like chaos going on, okay? We can't handle everything. We have to select what we handle. So what's urgent that you want to be that needs to be taken care of, and move forward with those three steps.
Now, I want to change gears here a little bit because, believe it or not, we're almost over with the full hour. But I do want to, there are two things that I find really important that I do want to talk about. And one is about change and transformation processes, because I find it unbelievably important for people to understand what a transformation process actually occurs, so that you're aware of what's coming at you. And I think it makes it so much easier for someone to understand and walk through something if you know what this process looks like. Because let's talk a little bit about what are the big pain points, so to speak, of a process that can lead to change.
Okay.
Well, I think it's interesting when we talk about change is that generally experiences change us, more so than information. So, for example, you might read a book about climbing a mountain, and after you read that book, do you really feel like you've had the experience of climbing a mountain? Now, if you have actually climbed the mountain, you've had the experience of climbing the mountain, that's going to change you. So information is not transformative. So there's something that needs to happen experientially, and that's why they had a lot of experiential workshops have gone around. But going into the jungle, climbing a mountain, having an experience changes you. And then in the coaching process, a tremendous amount of power to change. So it all begins with experience of something rather than something subjectively like information or reading a book or something.
So what I want to get to with this here is that very often, well, actually in every transformation process, it sounds so easy when you're at the onset, at the beginning, you're all hyped up, you want to do the change, you want to do the transformation. But when you look at the actual transformation process, and I always use the caterpillar or the butterfly as the blueprint, which is the blueprint for transformation. You have the caterpillar who moves in a certain way. The caterpillar eats a certain kind of nourishment or food, and then it spins itself into a pupa in the little cocoon and then dissolves itself, actually, the old way of thinking, the old way of existing. And then out of those out of its own matter, if you want, there then comes the butterfly that transforms into a completely different being. So there's a different way of it eats different foods, it has different nourishment, it moves differently. But when you go from caterpillar to pupa, there is a certain element of pain in there. And this is what I'm getting to. When people go through change, there comes a point when you know you're the most vulnerable when you go through that process, when you have new beliefs and new systems, and then that's when you usually get challenged the most.
Yeah, I think it's really important to be aware of that, Nicolette, to understand that it's not easy street. When we're making these changes, and to understand that it's going to be hard. One thing, I'll go back to again, we do an accountability every night where we have an open communication where people can send things that are bothering them, what happened during the day, how they accomplish things during the day. There's no question that fear is going to creep in again, right? The pain is going to creep in again.
Yep.
Being less secure is going to creep in because we all in crisis or change, we lower to the area of our comfortability. We don't exceed exceptionally outside of that. We come back inside of our comfort zone. So there's no question on all of that's going to be there. There is no magic pill that's going to get rid of that. It comes down to having someone that you can openly communicate with about that, talking about the fears, talking about and putting. I can't, and Richard said it, I can't stress enough to put good stuff in. Put good stuff in. If this stuff isn't serving you, like a lot of my young people I coach and mentor, they say, social media is unbelievable. Everything on there is like bringing me down. It's putting so much fear in me. It's making me feel doubtful. I'm having difficulty getting to my goals. And so I said, well, what can you do? If watching it is bothering you, what can you do? Don't watch it. That's a great idea. What about a week cleanse? Every night, let me know how it's going. These little things that seem tiny, they're not. Because if there's fear and faith inside of us, whichever one we feed the most is the one that's going to be prevalent. Yeah. So we need to know that the change is going to be difficult and painful. Yep. And all of these things are definitely going to come back up. Exactly. But counsel and talk to someone that can help you through it. That's huge.
And the pain, usually comes from the fact that we have some internal beliefs that are kind of keeping us in a certain place. And the pain is that we're scared to let go of those beliefs in order to move forward.
Exactly.
And that's where the pain and the struggle is. But once we realize, if we let go of those perspectives and those beliefs, and we reach out into a new direction, it's actually not as painful as we thought. So the pain is really a little bit subjective. It's in our head, but it feels real. Of course, it feels real. Yeah. Once we're able to push through that, to take on a new belief or a new perspective, and to really step. And I think, again with the action,
exactly.
The act that backs up. One of the things I do is I work with clients with something called a decision matrix. So you make a new decision, and then you look for evidence, or you take a new action to support that decision. And it's the action that creates the new experience that actually transforms you. So just thinking it inside of your head without the action not supported doesn't really complete the transformation. So that's why I said transformation is so experiential. You have to experience something, you have to do something to follow up with that.
I find this point really, really important for our viewers, particularly to understand that the pain comes from old belief, well, not necessarily old belief systems, but from belief systems that hold you back. It's that discrepancy, and once we understand that, then that's how we can bypass it. Now we have about 2.5 minutes left. I do want to spend those last 2.5 minutes on What would you advise people to do, our viewers out there, for example? What can they do as a day-to-day guide? What would be the first starting point when they say they go into next week? How can they actually make most of the week and figure out where they want to go and how they can leap off? Is there kind of like a little mind map that we can develop? Just a few points.
I would say find a mastermind group and be a part of it. Get around people that are where you want to be, not where you don't want to be. We did an exercise where you get in a women's empowerment group I do, where you get a small stone, smooth stone, and you write on that stone what limiting belief that somebody has labeled you with. Your family, maybe parents, unfortunately, a boss, whatever, whoever. They've labeled you with this. Lazy, indecisive, fearful. Whatever they've labeled you with, you write it on that rock with a Sharpie. You go outside and you throw it as far away as you can. And you find another rock, a beautiful rock, and you write on that rock your one word that you were claiming that's defining you, whether it's strong, resilient, right, growth-minded. And you keep that in front of you. And every single day you look at that rock. And every single day you get your master. We do a power hour where we get on. We don't have time to talk about that. We do the accountability, we do the mastermind groups. Use these techniques that we're talking about to get you from where you are, unstuck, to bounce to where you want to be. And it happens. You know, it happens every day. It'll happen for you too.
That's a great tip, Michele. And that's having something to practice, like what Michele said, is really great. I have a lot of very similar things. Something else that they can practice is every day, if they can ask themselves just one question each day. And that is, what is the most powerful thing that I can do today that will move me in the direction of my biggest goal? If they can ask themselves that one question, what's the most powerful thing that I can do today that will move me in the direction of my biggest goal, and then go do it? So to write this question down and try to do that in the beginning of the day for all the little mundane stuff. And this is something that successful people do. They try to tackle that one big activity each day that's going to move them forward. And they try to do that in the early part of the day and do the mundane stuff in the later part of the day.
Yeah, those are great tips, and we're basically out of time. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much to my guests. You heard two really great tips that are very easy to do. Remember the rock tip, and then also remember the question, what you really want to do and how you can move forward. Thanks so much. Have a good night.